Hey, everybody. As you can see, I am back at my mountain retreat. Now, the question for you is, what mountain is this? Okay. It's in Europe. Nothing, huh? It's in the Alps. Still nothing, huh? How about it's in Switzerland? Well, I'm not going to tell you either. Okay, so I'm going to go over the assignment for the special populations paper, which unfortunately many of you missed because of probably my ineptitude in not getting you all in on the recorded session on Monday. And secondly, it didn't enable me to record anyway. So here we go. Let me start with there we go. You will see if you go into the course and bring up assignments, I now have all of the synopses listed according to how they appear as you go through the course outline. So they are all there for the first half batch. So all you do is take each synopsis and insert it into the correct one. So I start off with the name of the book, tell you where to find it. These are your textbooks. And so just insert them there instead of emailing it to me. Okay, so let's go to the assignment, shall we, which you will submit here, Considerations in Organizing Oppressed Populations, cleverly enough titled. Okay. Isn't this fun? And voila. Okay, so your first task is to write on your paper number 1. Where did that come from? Well, it's right there, number 1. Identify an oppressed population in the United States which could benefit from community organizing. Okay, so let's back step a second. The whole point of this assignment is that when you organize different populations, there may be considerations you have to have in organizing them unique to that particular population. So, for example, if you are organizing people who had varying degrees of disabilities, one of the things you would have to consider unique to them is if I'm going to get them all together, I would have to come up with a room that's accessible, which is not something that would necessarily be a big consideration with another population. Anyway, that's the whole point. So organizing is organizing. I'm not even asking you to organize anything here. I'm simply asking you to what factors might you have to pay attention to unique to this particular population if you are organizing them. So when you identify your oppressed population, don't come up with something so narrow you'll never find data on it as per the next 2 points in the paper. So, for example, you could organize, you could identify the population that you want to organize as, say, homeless persons, or African American women, or all Latinos, so, or just Cuban Americans. So anyway, come up with a population you can find data on. I don't care what population, just don't keep it too narrow that you end up getting to number 3 and go, well, I don't know how to make this work. Okay, number 2, describe this population, size, and what distinguishes this population physically and or culturally from the rest of the population. Okay, first of all, size is simply demographics. How many people, if you're going to use homelessness, how many people are estimated to be homeless in the United States? But then you got to break it down a little bit more in terms of describing it. So, for example, what percentage are estimated to have or suffering from mental illness? How many are veterans? How many are entire families? So you need to break that down a little bit. Likewise, if you're doing African American women, perhaps you want to break that down further by how many perhaps are living in rural areas, how many in metropolitan areas, or you might want to break it down by classes, just to give a little bit more description about the population. So the sheer number is not enough. Break it down a little bit further and describe it a little bit more. Okay, what distinguishes this population physically and or culturally from the rest of the population? Those of you taking the minorities course know I ask you the same question there. Here's the point. They're an oppressed population. In order for them to be oppressed, they have to be identifiable by the majority population in order to be oppressed. So for example, with African American women, you could say, well, it's their darker skin tone allows the white population to oppress them. They have distinguishing features as women. Or if we're talking about Native Americans, then we're saying, oh, well, Native Americans, they do have, if they're following their tribal language, have a distinct language. Even though there's been a great deal of intermarriage, when you get to certain parts of the country where there's actually Native American reservations, they are distinguishable physically because of certain characteristics from the rest of the population. So that's what I'm going for here. Again, you can't go wrong by providing too much. Number two. Number three, and what do you get right on your paper? Yes, number three. Provide 5 points of statistical evidence of this population's oppression. In other words, you got to prove to me they're oppressed. So, for example, you don't have to use these. I'm just giving you examples of what you could use. What percentage of the population is in poverty? Or is there evidence of limited educational attainment for this population? Or is a relatively high percentage of this population suffering from a particular health issue, and so forth? In all cases, be sure to use comparative statistics to the general population to prove your point that this population is relatively oppressed. Because, for example, if you said, okay, well, I'm going to focus on the elderly in America for my oppressed population, well, you will find that's a tough sell because, for one, their overall, for example, the percentage of the elderly in poverty is much less than the overall percentage of Americans in poverty. So approximately 9 to 10% of the elderly in poverty in the United States, whereas the poverty percentage for everyone else is about 12 to 13. So you're proving just the opposite. They're not oppressed. So that's why it's got to be comparative to the overall population to prove your point. Also, this is critical. Make sure that you use data that's no more, I should say, than 5 years old. And the more recent, the better. You start citing data from 10 years ago, you're automatically going to get points taken off because it's irrelevant. It's like, that was 10 years ago. We need current data. So whenever you do any kind of a policy paper, the more current the data, the better. And definitely no more than 5 years old. So I will be looking for that. Now, again, I want 5 different points. So you can't give me 5 different points about health. Health is 1 point. Poverty be another point. Level of formal education achieved might be another point. Certain rights denied might be another point that are available to other Americans. So you can't just give me 5 points on health. That is just 1 point. Everybody got it? This is great because I'll just assume you do. Okay, number 4. In organizing a meeting or a gathering of this population, what factors unique to them should you consider and be sensitive to as an organizer that might hinder their gathering together? Okay, so here's the point. Let's imagine you want to get all these folks together in one big meeting. That's what I meant about organizing a meeting. I mean, literally organizing a meeting and getting them all together. What factors unique to them should you consider and be sensitive to as an organizer that might hinder their gathering together? For example, Native Americans, there's over 500 tribes of Native Americans, which would be a point you would mention in 2. And tribal identity for many is more important than the overall we're all Native Americans. So yes, they certainly do unify in a lot of causes, but it's also important to them for their tribal identity. So in organizing a meeting gathering this population, how would you handle any kind of tribal differences? Or how would you have a representative sample of Native Americans? That could be a hindrance in getting them together. Another example is the one I mentioned previously about, okay, well, we'd certainly have to have a room that's highly physically accessible if the whole group we're organizing is people with disabilities. Or for example, if you're organizing teenagers, there may be a factor of, okay, do you have permission because they're minors in order for them to be gathered together and do whatever you're doing? So just trying to give you examples, you're going to have to think this through, but these are the kinds of points as to why you're even doing this paper. What do I need to be sensitive to when I organize this particular population? Okay, so next, and again, there's two parts to the question, and I will look to see that you answer both parts of the question, because after all, I just asked the question, so I know you need to do both parts. Anyway, so how would these factors hinder the getting together? So you say, well, one factor is accessibility. Well, how would this factor hinder their getting together? So explain why you think this is a hindrance is basically what I'm asking here. Whatever you come up with the hindrances, why would this be a hindrance? Just explain. Number 5, and what are you going to write in your paper? Correct. Number 5. What measures would you take to remediate these potential hindrances? So all you're doing is reflecting back in here. So if you mentioned 3 different hindrances to getting them together, okay, these could all be obstacles getting them together. Then here, go right through back to these. Okay, for the first one I mentioned, here's what I would do about it. For this one, here's what I would do about it. And for this hindrance or this obstacle, here's what I would do about it. So 5 is simply reflecting back on 4 and tell me what you would do about it. Number 6, what stereotypic notions might this particular population have about you personally? I mean you personally, not the organizer generically. I mean you, whoever you are writing this paper. What stereotypic notions might this population have about you personally as an organizer that might inhibit the development of their trust in you? Okay, so here's what I'm getting at. Let's suppose you're relatively young and you're organizing a population of the elderly. It's just possible they may think, well, what do you know about us? You know, look how young you are. You haven't experienced being elderly. I don't know. I'm just saying what might be notions they have about you. What if you're a white person organizing Black people? There could be stereotypic notions. What if you're a Black person organizing white people? There could be stereotypic notions about you. So I'm not saying they exist. I'm saying think this through, because when you organize a population and when you come in as an organizer, in those first few weeks, as you're trying to know your population and know the people you're going to be working with, they're also trying to get to know you. And so you got to kind of think ahead and think, okay, what might they think about me stereotypically? And so here's what I want you to identify. So it's a matter of self-awareness. Okay, they may think this, they may think that. Okay, I got you. Then simply, how would you address these possible concerns? Well, for those of you who were in class, you may recall I said, how would you address it? And immediately hands went up and they said, we just ask them. Yeah, just ask. Now, you're not going to ask with, gee, I bet you think this, this, and this, and this about me. No, 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 no. You would simply ask some sort of a question, trying to solicit from them any questions they have about you. So please answer that part as well. I already gave you the answer. 7, yep, number 7, you're going to write in your paper. In your efforts to help this particular population reduce their oppressed status, what are the 3 most important problems you believe you would have to address? So in other words, just in general, forget about the organizing part per se, but what does this population need most so that they're no longer an oppressed population. So what are the three biggest problems inhibiting them or preventing them from being mainstream? In other words, what are the three main problems that cause their oppressed status? So what I want you to do is indicate what they are and explain each one thoroughly. Not a sentence, not a bullet. Give me a couple of sentences and explain what exactly is the problem and why is this contributing to their oppression and why does it need to be resolved. Then prioritize them and explain that prioritization. So in other words, here's the first problem, Maynard. Okay, excellent. Now you describe the problem and why this is causing them to be oppressed. Then you're going to indicate to me, why did you list this one number one? Why is this the first priority? Do the same thing with your second problem. Why is this the second priority? And then the third problem, why would this be ranked the third? You know, why would the other two be ranked higher? And why is this one also necessary? Got it? A lot of times students forget this part, so please do include it. Finally, for number 8, what social event, unique and appropriate to this population's culture, would you help to create to facilitate their bonding for them to have fun? Okay, so as I mentioned in class, you have to have some social gatherings with the people you're working with. When I used to coach basketball here at Cedar Crest, we would actually hold an event early on just to get everybody to know each other, because there's always new team members, new first-year students, and so it helps the social bonding. It helps them to get to know each other and as a result, play together more effectively as a team. Or it could be a celebration party at the end of the season. But the idea is you need to come up with an event that, and I want you to do this in a stereotypic way. So if you're organizing Cuban Americans, then I want you to come up with an event that would be specific to Cuban Americans. And you're going to indicate this to me, your sensitivity to that population, by describing what would be fun for that group. So in other words, I'm not suggesting when it comes to what type of food that every Cuban American every night eats black beans and rice. No. I'm just saying we're going to come up with a typical cultural event here. And so you're going to evidence to me that you understand this population well enough to understand what type of music would they like, what type of food might they like, what type of entertainment and activities would they like. So you got to answer all of these. And so students sometimes try to answer this in 3 sentences. Nah, explain thoroughly. I want to know what kind of music, what kind of food, what kind of entertainment and activities are you going to have that you think would be particularly appropriate to this particular culture. That's it. Of course, everybody asks, how long should this be? Typically, I've seen students, it's typically like, I don't know, 4 to 5 pages at the most. Paper must be APA formatted. Any paper submitted without numbered sections, I'll just return it ungraded and it'll constitute a late paper until it's corrected. So give me these numbers so it's easy for me to follow and it's easy for you to stay on point. For number 1, just list the population. Don't explain to me why you picked it. I didn't ask you for that. Just list the population. Keep it simple. What I value most of all is informative but succinct papers. So not succinct at the expense of informative, but try to keep the word count down while still telling me everything that I need to know. Everybody got it? Good. Okay, kids, this is due on September 28th, which is why I wanted to get this out to you right away to those of you who missed this presentation at the beginning of class on Monday. All right, everybody, have fun, and I'll see you on Monday.